YouTube. Hello YouTube, welcome to my channel. That's a really weird thing, cut. Let's do it again. YouTube. Sorry, I'm still trying to figure out what the best introduction is. Let me turn off that backlight. Much better. Hello YouTube. Hello YouTube, welcome to my channel. That's a really weird thing, cut. Let's do it again. Sorry, coffee break. Hey YouTube, my name is Alexis and I am going to be an incoming first year student to a physician assistant program that starts in August of 2023. And it has been a really long journey. It has been a process of trial and error, and that's kind of why I'm making this video today. So if you see me looking down and looking over, that's me looking at my notes and making sure that I'm not going off track, because that is something that I tend to do. So it's just to make sure that I stay on track and I'm giving the information that needs to be in this video.
A few moments later.
Sorry you guys, I had to cut this video because it is snowing right now. And this bird is just perched. So, I scared away. It's just chilling, guys. I don't know. Are you cold? Do you want to come in? I don't know. Let me know. So, as you can see from the title of the video, it's called Things I Wish I Knew Before Applying to PA School. And the reason why I decided to make this video is because when this was my second cycle applying to PA school, which I got in, I don't really count my first cycle, but it was an experience. I do think it's something to shed light on. The things that I'm going to mention in this video is kind of advice and things that I wish I knew before I applied to PA school my first year, and, questions that I had my second time applying that, that I kind of had to go through trial and error, but I found YouTube, Instagram, Facebook to be a really great resource to help me answer some of these questions. So I'm putting in a video format, so hopefully it can help someone else in the future. Paying it forward. So like I said, this was my second, I'm like struggling. So like I said, this was my second cycle applying to PA school. I applied first cycle 2021 to 2022. And the first cycle was truly a hot mess. There was no plan for it whatsoever. So I'm gonna compare my first cycle to my second cycle, and I think kind of how I got in basically this cycle. So when I applied my first cycle of PA school in 2021, I had just quit my job working at a hospital for 4.5 years, specifically working in breast oncology clinical research. And so at the time I was in charge of 12 to 15 trials, and I had varying amounts of patients on those trials as well. So working 4.5 years there, I got to work with some incredible medical providers, PAs, NPs, nutritionists, and it was truly an amazing experience. I mean, I think oncology is something that's definitely on my list that I am potentially thinking about going back to when I'm a PA, but we have time. I haven't even started school yet, so I know people's ideas of what they want to do changes. I was very burnt out by the last few months of that job, and I just kind of needed a change, not so much in a career, but also just my environment. I'm originally from the Bronx. If you know where that is, it's the best borough in New York City. But I am originally from the Bronx, and I went to middle school and high school in New York City. So I'm a New Yorker, and I went to college in Pennsylvania. And as soon as I graduated, I moved back to New York and moved into New York City probably about 3 months after I got this job and found an apartment, all that stuff. So I've kind of always lived in New York, and I just needed a change. I didn't want to be a New Yorker who never leaves New York. There is a beauty of loving where you're from, but I knew that I needed something different. So Colorado was always a place that was in the back of my mind. I'd been visiting for the past 4 years, snowboarding with friends, hiking, doing all the fun things that one does in Colorado. And I just needed something. I needed a change. So I quit my job. I found a job out in Colorado that would allow me to move and transition. I work from home currently. And the rest is history. So in May of 2021, I packed up my apartment and moved to Denver, Colorado. So at that point, I was ready for applying to PA school. I had taken all the prerequisite courses that I needed. And at that point, I was ready to apply. But the thing is, I just moved to Denver. This is the place I've wanted to live for the past 4 years. And I didn't want to cut that trip short. So I basically only applied to 5 schools my first cycle. And this is where my first mistake is, and this is my first piece of advice. Do not just apply to 5 schools. I know it does work for some people, but I think that you should definitely apply to more schools. And so by that, I don't mean apply to 20, 30, 40 schools. I don't think that's necessary, but I do think it's good to have maybe 12 to 15 is what I would recommend, but it also depends on financially what you can afford. When applying to schools, make sure, one, that you know why you're applying to that school. It's gonna help write the essays for why you wanna go to the school. Trust me, every school's essay is basically some form of why do you wanna attend this school. But my biggest thing is make sure that you read the mission of the school, the vision of the school, and also go through the curriculum schedule, because those are important indicators of what the curriculum is going to be like. But also the mission and the vision of the program is basically the school telling you this is the kind of education you're going to get in our program, and this is the kind of PA you are going to become after you complete our program. So that's something I didn't do my first cycle, and that's just purely because I wanted to stay in Colorado. So I just applied. There was only 5 schools to apply to, so I applied to all 5 of them. But I would say for my second cycle, I definitely took the time to read through the mission, the vision, and the curriculum for each of my programs. So by that point, I had 15 schools that I liked. And then I whittled them down to 12 based on how my application would appear to the program. And what I mean by that is, did my application match what the mission and the vision of the program is? So what I mean by that is, if you are an applicant who doesn't really do community service, and then the school, their mission is they want PAs who are going to give back to the community, if you didn't have any experience to show that you've done that, I personally wouldn't recommend applying to the school. So that's what I mean by looking at my application and looking at the school's mission and their visions, and could I see myself there? Was my application competitive enough to meet the requirements of the school? So that's my first piece of advice. Make sure you look at the mission, the vision, the curriculum, and then compare that to your application. And is that a school that you would fit into? So my second piece of advice now, so when I was also looking at schools, I was very stressed out about accredited schools versus provisional schools versus schools that are on probation. Little bit of advice I would say to this is when I was applying to schools, in both my first and my second cycle, I didn't really look at if the school was accredited, provisional, or on probation. What I will say to this is first cycle, didn't even get an interview, so it's not anything that I considered. Second cycle, I only considered that when it came to the interviews. So the first school that I interviewed at, which is the school I'm going to be attending in the fall, it was accredited, so I didn't really have an issue with that. But then once I did get accepted into that school, and then other schools started to ask me for interviews, that's when I started looking at their accreditation, because I got into my number one school. I applied in July to this school. I had my interview in October, and I got accepted in November. But I would say once I got into my number one dream school, I kind of compared every school to that who asked me for an interview. And I don't know if that's the best way to go about it, but the other schools that I got interviewed from, one was on probation, and one of them was provisional. So by that point, I was kind of just like, well, I already got into an accredited program. Why consider a provisional program or a probationary program? And I decided not to interview with that second school because I got into my number one. So for me, it was kind of a done deal. I guess some advice people would say is just go to the interview. But for me, I didn't want to take a spot from somebody who was still waiting when I already knew I was going to go to the school that I got into. So that's kind of why I didn't interview anywhere else. But anyway, going off topic, that's my one piece of advice about looking at accredited, provisional, probation. I say apply to the schools, and then based on where you get interviews at, if you are lucky to have options, that's when I would consider it. But if you've only heard from one school, go to the school. Literally go where you get in. Options is great, but if you get in, go. That's my 2 cents on the matter. First cycle compared to second cycle, my biggest thing was make sure you look at the requirements, because every school is different. So what I mean by that is when you are on the school's website, they have eligibility requirements for their programs, and every school is different. This is something that I didn't really know applying my first cycle, and it kind of stressed me out because what I had to actually do during my first cycle, but I did not look at the eligibility requirements for the schools. And I know that's one of those things where it's like, girl, how could you not? I'm sorry, I just wanted to stay. So I applied to 5 schools my first cycle, paid the money, and I heard back from a school right away that I did not meet the eligibility requirements to even look at my application. Sorry. So I was like, hold up, wait a minute. Something's off. So I went to go look at the eligibility requirements, and I didn't have, what is it called?
A few minutes later.
So I didn't have medical terminology, and I also didn't have essentials in nutrition. So I immediately didn't get an interview for it because I didn't have that. And so my piece of advice is obviously make sure you look at the required eligibility requirements, but also even if the school says it's preferred but not required, I would still take the course, and I would be hesitant on applying to the school if you don't have time to take or finish the course. And the reason for that is because I remember when I was my first cycle, I was so devastated that I had paid all this money to these schools, to these 5 schools, and I didn't even meet the eligibility for some of them. And I was so devastated by that. And I found it frustrating. Like, why do all these schools have different eligibility? Let me in, please. I did all this work in my undergrad, and I paid so much money after undergrad to take some of these courses. So why are there different eligibility? But at the end of the day, now that I'm in a program and now that I went through the process, I completely understand why certain schools have different eligibility. They don't just put eligibility requirements to make your life harder. They know you want to be a PA from, your whole application. The eligibility really is to make sure that the student will be prepared for their program. So schools that push psychology, medical terminology, all that stuff, they're not trying to make it harder to get into their program. They really just want you to be prepared. And by taking those courses, you will be more prepared for the kind of learning that you will get in their program. So it's annoying. It really sucks. It also sucks when you've spent the money and you didn't look at the eligibility. That's my other piece of advice. Just make sure you look at the requirements. Every school is different. And if you have the time to take those courses so you could be a better applicant for the school, I say go for it. But if there's not enough time, if it's too stressful, if it's just not something you want to do, don't do it. That puts me into my next thing, the GRE. I'm gonna say a little brief thing on this. I didn't take the GRE. I studied for it, hated it, didn't think it was useful at all. And I think I got really lucky because all of the schools that I applied to second cycle were all West Coast. And West Coast schools, most of them, you don't need the GRE. So I got really lucky there. I would say take the GRE, especially if there's a school you want to go to and it requires the GRE or the GRE is preferred. What did I say about preferred? Do it anyway. But if it's not something you want to study for, I just didn't want to study for it. I studied for 3 months and I took it and I did okay. But one of the schools, Duke, that I really wanted to apply to, again, I wanted to live west. So what was the point of taking the GRE for one school? All right, now we're done we've looked at the schools, we've narrowed it down, we've whittled it down, we are eligible for the schools, we like their mission, we like their vision, we like their curriculum. All right, now it's about the CASPA. Okay, so my CASPA from my first cycle applying to my second cycle applying was a 360. I don't want to say that my level of effort wasn't as great my first cycle, but I think my second cycle, I really, really knew who I was as an applicant. I just feel like I knew myself a little bit more from my first cycle compared to my second cycle. And I think that also was because I wasn't being restricted by just applying to schools in one state. I really branched out my second cycle, still West Coast, but branched out a little bit more. And I knew only applying to West Coast schools was going to be a risk because I am from the East Coast. My PA advisor said that West Coast schools tend to be a little bit more particular about East Coast students because they obviously want their students to stay. And that is something that was asked of me in my interview for the school that I am attending. So is it risky? Yes, but I also think if you know yourself and you know that, like, I knew I wanted to stay West Coast and I knew California was somewhere I wanted to be. So for me, it was very easy to kind of, I don't want to say convince, but it was very easy to kind of tell my story as to why I only applied to West Coast schools because I knew that's where I wanted to be. So my first piece of advice with CASPA would have to do with your personal statement. Like my second cycle personal statement is significantly get better than the first one I wrote. And so my advice to that is when you're writing your personal statement, remember your why. Remember why you want to be a PA. Why have you gone through the years of getting the experience? Why do you want to be a PA? That's something to remember when you're writing your essay. And I know it's kind of one of those things where it's like, yeah, duh. It's so hard to write a personal statement because all you have is a character limit and it just says, tell me about yourself, right? My advice to this is going back to my resume. Your resume is gold, okay? I always say, like, even preparing for an interview, read your resume. Everything about your life is on your resume. And that is something you always want to go back to, especially writing your personal statement. So writing your personal statement, why do you want to be a PA? What drove you to become a PA? What drove you to the healthcare? What drove you to want to work with underserved communities? Why a PA? There's MDs, there's DOs, there's NPs, nutritionists. why PA? That's like top 5 interview question. Why PA? So you really, really want to make sure you have that hammered down. What drove you to become a PA? What life experiences got you there? How did you get there? Right? And so these are what, where, how, why, of course, but literally get a piece of paper and write it down. Write a what bracket, write a why column, write a how column, right? Write a where column. And just list these things out, and this is going to help you write your personal statement. Your personal statement is the best way for the school to get to know you before they interview you. So you want to make sure you have as much pertinent information about you, but also what separates you from the same applicant who was a biology major, from the same applicant who worked at a hospital, who was an EMT, who was a medical assistant. And then once you've wrote all that information out, what makes you different? What makes you unique? We all kind of do the same thing to get experiences, but we all get there a different way. So that's something that's really, really key when you're writing your personal statement. With the CASPA, once you've gotten your personal statement down, I know GPA, we got to talk about it. I think GPA is the most stressful part about applying to PA school, especially if you were a student who didn't do well in your undergrad or didn't push yourself as much, and everyone has a reason for why their GPA isn't what they would like it to be. So I would say GPA does matter, but it's not the end of your dream if it's not a 3.5 or if it's low. But what I would say is that you at least need a 3.0 overall GPA to even be considered for PA's programs. And so there are a few programs who their GPA is below a 3.0, like a 2.5 and above. I just think overall you need a 3.0 GPA to even be considered by schools, not just in your overall science, but also not in just your overall GPA, but make sure your science and your biology, chemistry, physics, BCP GPA is at least a 3.0. I know that screws over a lot of people. So when you're looking at the requirements of the school, if your overall GPA is a 3.0, but they require your science GPA to be above a 3.0, 3.2, and your GPA and your science and your BCP isn't, you're not going to get an interview. So those are real things to really look at when you're applying to PA school. And like I said, if your GPA is not even the minimum, don't apply. You're not going to get an interview. I promise you, they won't even look at your application. Like I said, GPA, it matters, but it's not the end of the world. If it's a low GPA, just make sure it's above a 3.0 or whatever the school's minimum requires. But in general, 3.0, I think. So I was a little bit insecure about my GPA. It wasn't low, like it wasn't below a 3.0, but it wasn't, a nice 3.5. I was very insecure about my GPA, and first cycle, I blamed not getting into a program because of my GPA, which is stupid. I don't think my GPA is what stopped me from getting most of my interviews first cycle. I think that instead of being as insecure about my GPA first cycle, second cycle, I used that to my advantage. So what I mean by that is, yes, my GPA was, it wasn't a beautiful 3.6 and above, which I would consider would be competitive. But what I used was I took courses from my first cycle to my second cycle. I did amazing in those courses. This was my GPA for those outside courses that I did. And this shows growth. This shows that I am ready for the challenges that are going to come into PA school. I'm ready to study. I'm ready to learn from my mistakes. From those mistakes, I learned better study habits. I learned the kind of studying that I need to do to make sure I retain that information. Use your weakness as a strength. Your weakness is only a weakness if you play into it as your weakness. Your weakness can become your strength as long as you learn from it. Don't let GPA freak you out. you have other parts of your application that I'm sure are stellar and that I'm sure a school is going to love. Lean into those, but also don't be afraid to point out your weakness and turn that into a strength. The next piece of advice is when you're applying to schools, make sure that the school speaks to who you are and your experiences. What I mean by that is, again, your resume is gold. Look at your resume when you are applying to these schools, when you're reading the mission, the vision, the curriculum of the program. Does your experiences match the school? Is that somewhere you want to go? I think people stress out about I have to apply to 20 plus schools to have options, but it's kind of a waste of money to apply to all those schools if your application doesn't fit with the program, if your experiences don't fit with the kind of PA that they want, the PA that you want to be, but also the PA that the school wants to make you. So I think it's really important to, when you're applying to schools, factor in, do you even want to go there? Location, is that somewhere you want to live for the next 2 to 3 years? The mission of the program, is that something that you also think is important to you and a reason why you want to become a PA? Cost is also something you want to consider. Cost is important. I don't want to tell people how to look at cost because everyone's kind of experience and lifestyle is a little bit different, but that is something that you want to factor in. And curriculum is very important. Do you like the teaching style? Is there enough breaks for you? The program, is it 2 years or 3 years? Is that something that's important to you? So don't just apply to schools to have a lot of options. Apply to the school that is best fit for you. So then my next piece of advice with the CASPA is to make sure your experiences, so there is a section in the CASPA where you put your experiences. This is your volunteer, your leadership, your patient care, your shadowing, your non-healthcare, and your non-healthcare employment. So my biggest advice is when you're putting your experiences into this section of CASPA, make sure the experiences that you're adding are meaningful to you. That means that you can speak to it. There was a reason why you did it. You learned something from it. So what is the story of the experience? And then what did you do? How did you do it? What did you learn from it? So again, it's that what, why, how, where column chart that you want to make. And the reason why I say that is because my first cycle, I put a ton of experiences that I did. And I would say most of the experiences I put down, I couldn't really speak to what I learned from it. Like, I know why I did it, but what did I learn from it? Why did that, how did that experience make me want to be a PA? How did that experience make me want to work with underserved community? How did those are things that you want to remember, because when you do the interview, when you finally get that first interview, those are the questions they're gonna ask you. And if you can't speak to those experiences, if you can't speak to why you did something, why'd you put it on there, right? That's my 2 cents. If you have an experience, but you can't tell me what about it, why you did it and what, just don't put it. Don't put it there, right? Make sure your experiences are relevant to your application, relevant to who you are as a person, relevant to your story and why you want to be a PA, why you want to work with underserved communities, why, all those things. Make sure your experience can evoke that emotion and you can speak to it. So now you have finally finished your CASPA application. You are ready. You've sent it in. My next piece of advice: be kind to yourself. Be patient. The process is already hard enough without you putting extra pressure on yourself and putting yourself down. You did everything you could to get to this point, and you need to be confident in the application, the effort that you put in, the experiences you had. You have to be confident with all of that and be secure enough to say, it's out there, I'm done. I did not take that advice my first or second cycle applying to PA school. Honestly, I was stressed out the whole entire time, periodically checking my email, checking the PA forums, literally being a crazy person about it. And I really wish I had just taken a deep breath and just relaxed and not been so hard on myself. I have a tendency to do that. That is something that I'm working on before I start PA school, because it's not going to get any easier. So what I'm going to say to you is just, you worked really, really hard to get to this point. You know yourself better than any of those people who are going to read your application. And as long as you know you gave 110% working on that working on that application, that's what matters. So you just need to be confident in you and just kind of sit back, relax, and just wait for those emails to hopefully come with those interview requests. My first cycle applying was complete 360 to my second cycle applying. I just felt more confident in my personal statement. I felt more confident in the experiences that I put in my CASPA application. I felt better about the schools that I applied to. I applied to 12 schools, and those 12 schools really resonated with my resume and my application. I could really see myself in those schools. I did apply to 3 reach schools, and what I mean by reach was they were just schools that I didn't even think they would even look at my application. And that was me being insecure about my application. And again, like I said, don't be insecure. You worked hard to get here. Bring that confidence to applying to the schools, to the interview process as well. So that goes into my last piece of advice that I want to give is prepping for interviews. Make sure you prep. Do not go into an interview having not prepped for it. I'm telling you, it's a mistake. You want to make sure you prep for your interviews. And the reason for that being, prep is important. You don't want to go into an interview being like, yeah, I know my stuff. Like, no, they're not going to accept you acting like that. And why I say prep for your interview is, like I said, your resume is gold. Prepping for your interview, make sure you go back to your resume and make sure you know every single experience you put in your resume, because I'm telling you that is going to come up in your interview. And if you can't speak to, again, like I said, what was the experience? Why did you do it? What did you learn from it? Why do you think this is going to make you a better provider, a better PA? How do you plan to help underserved community? All of that stuff is going to come from your resume and your experiences. And if you can't speak to that, you've already lost the interview. There are a lot of interview prep books that you can read for PA school. The one I read was the interview guide from Savannah Perry. I highly recommend this book. I made notes. I ear tabbed a bunch of things. And in the back, she actually has a master question list. And it basically is all of the questions that were in the book are basically all written here. And you can't really see, but look, I wrote notes. I circled ones that I didn't really know how I would answer it. And I just kind of went through and just made little notes. I say practice answering your interview questions out loud. So what I did was I set up my computer and I went through each question and I just responded to the computer, made sure that I had eye contact, made sure that I didn't say as much. So I would say don't rehearse your answers, because if you rehearse them, it's going to not feel genuine. Prep the questions in terms of bullet pointing your answers. So if the question was why PA, I put little bullet points of why I knew I wanted to be a PA. Those are things that I did to bullet point just to make sure I stayed on track when answering the questions. On track is key. If someone is asking you a question and you go off to a tangent of something else, no. You want to make sure you've answered the question that the interviewer gave you. And then I think this is chef kiss of an interview, when you answer the interviewer's question and then you're able to pull a personal experience out of your life that further not only answers their question, but also gives more incentive but also gives more information up to who you are as a person, why you want to be a PA, that higher level of answering a question is, I think, what gets you the acceptance after the interview. So those are key things that I would keep in mind. This is in post editing of this video, but I wanted to make sure that I added during the interview process, one, make sure you are yourself. No matter what the style of the interview is, you want to make sure that you are being your most genuine self. And the reason for that is because as much as the school is interviewing you, you are also interviewing the school. So it doesn't do you any service to kind of to not be yourself or answer in a way that's not true to you. Because remember, you want to make sure that you are attending a program that's going to fit you, not just who you are as a person, but your learning style, like your mission. Why do you want to be a PA? What do you care about? So all of that stuff is really important in an interview. So you want to make sure that you are present. You want to make sure that you're yourself, but you also want to make sure that when they give you open forum to ask questions about the school, you make sure you take every opportunity to do that. And whether you come with a notes and you've already got your notes listed, or during the whole interview process, questions have come up, make sure you take that time out of the interview to ask those questions. Because one, you're showing the school that you're actually interested in their school, but also two, you are showing your interviewer that you are taking this entire process seriously to make sure that you end up in the program that is the best fit for you. And the last thing I want to talk about, not all schools require this, but CASPA. You cannot prepare for CASPA. What I did was I watched some YouTube videos on it. I don't find the YouTube videos very helpful for CASPA because the scenarios that they place, the answers to those, I was like, there's no way those people had 2 minutes to write this 5-page answer to these CASPA questions. So I recommend watching the videos. I think watching the videos gives you an idea of how CASPA wants you to answer them. But CASPA, you really can't prepare for it. I think just go in and play devil's advocate when you answer obviously answer the question, because that's key. Give your opinion. You have to have a definitive, yes, I agree with this statement, or no, I don't agree with this statement. Give your reasons why. Play devil's advocate, but also, again, stay true to your point on why you answered the way you did. So CASPA, there's no real easy way to ace it. I did really well on the CASPA my first and my second cycle. So again, I just kind of answered it to the best of my ability. But at the end of the day, I gave a definitive answer. So that is all the advice that I have to give. I hope this was very helpful. These are definitely, like I said, things that I wish I knew before I applied to PA school. And so I hope that this will pay it forward to someone else who might also have these questions. So finally, I'm sure if you've made it through the end of this video, this is what you're here for in terms of where am I going to PA school? Drum roll, please. USC! I am so excited to be attending USC's PA program in August of this year. It was, like I said, my dream school. So I'll tell you now, my 3 top schools when I was applying to PA school, second cycle. So this is coming from a girl who didn't get any interview first cycle, none at all. So second cycle, like I said, I applied to 12 schools. My top 3 schools were Yale, Toru, and USC. I got interviews from 2 out of the 3 schools. USC was the first one I got an interview for, interviewed in October and got accepted in November. All my other schools that I heard from started trickling in between November and January, to which point I knew I was going to go to USC. It was my number 1 school, and there was nothing to compare it to after that. So like I said, one of the schools was on probation, one school was provisional. So those schools I automatically didn't interview for because I already got into an amazing accredited PA program that I really, really loved and could see myself in. And then it was just deciding if I wanted to do another interview. And at that point, I knew for sure, even if I interviewed with that other school, and I liked it. I knew for sure I wanted to go to USC, and I didn't want to take this seat. I didn't want to take a seat from someone else, and I didn't want to crush someone else's dream of potentially getting an interview, especially coming from someone who last cycle had been through the exact same thing. So I only interviewed at one school. Some people can feel any way about it, but it's my dream school. I'm so excited that I'm going to be a PA at USC, and I just can't wait. So this is definitely a new channel. I definitely want to keep doing this because for me, why I even wanted to make this video was I just had so many questions. And there's some really great resource from Instagram, PA Forum, also like YouTube. Peyton Fowler is a PA that I really watched her videos. It helped with a lot of my anxiety. Adana, the PA, is also a really great resource as well. I watch her videos. But I just wanted to make one because I felt like even though those videos were great resources to help me, there just wasn't a video like this that really just like answered every single one of my questions that I had going through the whole CASPA process. And I'm so happy that I didn't give up my first cycle. For me, PA school, it wasn't if I was gonna get in, it was always when I was gonna get into PA school. I'm so happy that I did do that first cycle because it was a very big learning experience for me, and I think that is why my second cycle was as good as it was, because I took all those I don't want to call them failures, but I took all those mistakes that I made in my first cycle and made my application better for the second cycle. So plans for this channel, I want to keep giving you PA content. Obviously, I don't start the program till August. But the really great thing about it is I will be moving. So I am going to LA in a few weeks to go look at apartments. So that will be a video coming up. And then I have some amazing friends who, one friend got into law school, another friend got into med school, another friend got into a PhD program for neuroscience. So I definitely want to make videos kind of comparing what applying to PA school to applying to a PhD program or applying to law school. So I definitely have some more videos coming out, but there will be more videos. I will definitely be filming more of my PA journey, going to USC. Like I said, it's my dream school, and I'm so excited to share this experience with you guys, and hopefully you stick around. So yeah, my name, like I said, is Alexis. I will be attending USC's PA program in August of this year, and I can't wait to share some more about my life and what's going on. So I hope you guys have a great day, night, afternoon, whatever time zone you guys are in. And yeah, bye. Oh, now I can do the peace sign and it's like not cringy anymore. Not the duck lips though. Bye.